This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, folks, and thank you for bearing with me as I start from the beginning here, just briefly, just as a review. So when we think of the human body, we think of it as a very organized structure. So the human body, the human organism, is comprised of, let's start from the beginning and really from the very tiniest, smallest level, atomic level. So atoms. So chemicals are made up of atoms. Cells are made up of chemicals and atoms. Tissues are made up of cells. Organs are made up of different types of tissues. Organ systems or body systems are made up of different types of organs, which are made up of tissues, which are made up of cells, chemicals, and atoms, right? So you'll see here that the human organism comprised of all of these different structures, and it's very unique. I said to you that there are 4 different types of tissues: epithelial, connective, muscular, and nervous tissue. And examples of epithelial tissue can say be the skin, right? We call it, the technical term would be the integument. Connective tissue, we have blood is a fluid connective tissue. Bone, we have cartilage. We'll have like adipose tissue, which is fat. These are all examples of connective tissue. We have muscular tissue, which we would have 3 different types: skeletal, which you have conscious control over; smooth; and cardiac muscle for your heart. And then lastly, nervous tissue. So you're thinking of your brain, your spinal cord, and the nerves. That would be nervous tissue. So the epithelial tissue, I said to you, really focus on the fact that it covers and lines structures. So covers the body surface, for say the skin, and lining its cavities and tubes, say for the organs of the body, as well as tubes like the digestive system, as well as blood vessels. Okay, that would be a good example. And then know that it's anchored, the bottom of the epithelial tissue is anchored via the basement membrane. We talked about the basement is really the anchoring, the bottom layer of your home, upon which it's the foundation upon which the house is built. So when we think of the basement membrane, we think of that this tissue, whether it's one layer or multiple layers, is anchored via this basement membrane to other tissue, and primarily it's anchored to like connective tissue. And in particular, a type of connective tissue would be an areolar connective tissue. It's a special type of connective tissue. So as far as epithelial tissue is concerned, so we have simple and stratified. We have one layer and multiple layers of tissue. And then we have pseudostratified, which would represent, it appears to be multiple layers, but it's only one layer. Here's an image to see these different types of epithelial tissue. We have squamous, cube-shaped or cuboidal, and columnar, these rectangular shape. And we said that the dots here, these dark areas, those are the nuclei, the nucleus of a cell. And the nucleus of the cell contains genetic material, DNA, which will allow for the reproduction of that cell. So we can have one parent cell. So let's just take this cell right here. This one right here, one cell. It has DNA present within the nucleus. And via what's called mitosis or mitotic division, we can take one cell and produce 2 identical daughter cells to that one cell. So it's pretty cool stuff. So let's move on, and you'll see that this chart here, this table, helps you to see where in the location of these different types of tissue. And so that's helpful to be able to review and look at and to know. And then we were just finishing with, when I started, had to go back and record, was the talking about exocrine and endocrine glands. And I talked to you, discussed with you regarding endocrine glands. You think they produce hormones. In particular, these are chemicals that are released into the blood that will help the body to either grow, as in the case of growth hormone, or in the case of like testosterone or estrogen, making us a male or a female, giving us secondary sex characteristics like the formation of breasts, the maturation of our organs present within the reproductive system. That would be for estrogen, progesterone, right? And also involved in the female ovarian and uterine cycles that we'll talk about at the end of the semester. Exocrine glands are actually glands that are releasing a substance, a secretion, via a tube out onto the skin surface or into an organ or a tube of our bodies. Okay, so think in terms of like sweat, think mucus, what else? Actually, milk, breast milk, That would be an exocrine secretion. Also, what's else? Oil, sweat. Yeah, so those are some examples of exocrine mucus, exocrine functions, and exocrine secretions. Now, as we get here to other types of tissue, this is the connective tissue. We can think of connective tissue as being either loose or dense. Okay, connective tissue is supportive and it's protective. Okay, of the body tissues. Right. So loose connective tissue, it kind of is what it says as far as it's a different presentation than this dense connective tissue. So when you think of dense connective tissue, think of a tendon or a ligament. So a tendon will connect a muscle to a bone, and a ligament will connect bone to bone and help it to stay together. Okay, so stronger than the loose connective tissue. Loose connective tissue, we think of it being flexible. We have all, I'm sure, ordered from Amazon and eBay and online and such. And what do you receive when you get your package? It's packed in some like bubble tape and plastic and different stuff, right? Well, think of loose connective tissue as kind of like that bubble wrap, and also it really like helps to keep everything together and tight, so it's not really bouncing around in your package. Loose connective tissue, flexible. And so here you have examples of the different types of connective tissues. And I mentioned to you, and these you kind of really probably have not really heard much of, but cartilage, you know what that is, right? Bone, adipose tissue, which is fat, blood. These are all types of connective tissue. And here's examples of them. So this is that areolar connective tissue I mentioned to you about, this loose connective tissue. You'll see here that there are these lines. See these lines? It looks like a pen mark, right? Those are elastic fibers. And you see the purple here? Those are collagen fibers. These are types of proteins that the collagen, the purple, is really for strength. And the lines, the dark lines, the elastic fibers, they allow for the tissue to be able to stretch and recoil, come back to what it should be, right? So elasticity, you see that right here where it says, right? And then you'll see these cells here. These are cells that actually are involved in the immune process, as well as what's called fibroblasts. These are fiber-producing cells, okay? You'll see here, as far as this dense type of connective tissue, we have for ligaments and tendons. So you'll see here for ligaments and tendons. And this is also for this dense irregular connective tissue would be for the second layer of your skin, which would be the dermis. Okay, it's comprised of this type of haphazard fibers, right? These are also collagen. So collagen, 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 a very strong protein. And so they're irregular in their appearance because when you try and move your skin has some movement, right? But it still is pretty firm as far as it's staying connected to your underlying layers. It's not just real loose and loosey-goosey and just kind of like flopping on your body. It's not doing that because of those. And you can move your skin in all different types of directions because of these irregular fibers that are holding the skin in all different directions. Pretty neat, right? You'll see here as far as the ligaments and the tendons, right? So they have this appearance where they're very strong. Imagine this, right? You're working out with weights or you're doing some type of exercise. Very rarely, but it does occur, where people will have a tear of their tendon and it'll cause the muscle belly to kind of like bunch up. Look up here, I'll show you. I'll show you an image. I'll show you a bicipital tear, a tear of the biceps. Okay, so let's here as far as the image is concerned. Yeah, so take a look at this here. And so what's gone on is that you see how this muscle is kind of all bunched up because there's been damage to the tendon. Okay, so there's been damage to the tendon, and as a result, instead of the muscle being nice and long, and then when you make it, here we go. You see how it's been damaged right here? So here's a healthy muscle. Biceps has two heads to it, so it has two portions to it, two muscle bellies. Look at what's happened here, that there's been a tear to the tendon where it's been anchored, and so it's kind of bunched up. Here's another image right here. See how it's not really stretched out, the muscle belly is bunched up. Okay. So that's an example of that when a tendon has an issue and it tears. But really, I have to tell you that tendons are very strong. And so they usually, unless you're really putting a lot of strain to them, or you have some type of disease process that creates a weakening of these dense, irregular connective tissue, everything should be well. And then cartilage. Cartilage, you see, has these chondrocytes, these little dots. These are chondrocytes. These are cartilage cells. And cartilage does not have a blood supply. So going back to the epithelial tissue, right? The epithelial tissue doesn't have a direct blood supply. Well, that's also true with cartilage. So when cartilage is damaged, cartilage takes a long time to heal. Okay, so it's really it's very tough, durable tissue, and it protects the ends of our bones. It acts as a cushion in our spine, right? The intervertebral discs, the spaces between our vertebra, right? Those are different types of cartilage and such, and they're very so look here, it says support, flexibility, low friction surface for a joint movement. So they're also on the ends of bones and allow for our joints to move freely. Okay, cartilage is a very important connective tissue. So you'll see here, this is that slide that shows you types of connective tissue: cartilage, bone, and we already know bone. And we're going to go into bone in more. We're going to go into more detail with some of these, all of these, as far as depending upon the chapter that we're looking at. But you'll see here, as far as cartilage is very important for the joints of the body. Bone for the protective and supportive aspect of the body, and bone is living tissue. If you fracture a bone, it does bleed because it's highly vascular, whereas cartilage, no blood supply. Cartilage, no blood supply, but bone, very vascular. Adipose tissue, this is fat, and this fat as a protective mechanism, right, as well as nutritive function. So providing nutrition when we're not taking in any nutrition, the body can take the adipose tissue and use it for food, for nutrition. And then blood, and we'll talk about that in the cardiovascular system. The muscles that we talked about are skeletal, smooth, and cardiac muscle. So skeletal muscle is the muscle that you're thinking of when you move your body. That's skeletal muscle, right? You have conscious control. I think about moving my arm, and I'm able to do it. Smooth muscle, this is muscle that you don't have control of. So recall when I showed you the stomach, and so know that an organ of the body, the tubes of the body, contain smooth muscle. I don't have control over that muscle, yet the body, the brain does, and it's able to move substances and move material and move the actual organ itself in any way it can in order to provide proper function, but I don't have conscious control. I can't tell my stomach, hey, you need to start working. Although sometimes we wish we could, right? The cardiac muscle, that again too, that's also involuntary. Can't control it, but know that our cardiac muscle, our heart, is doing its job, and that's important. So you'll see here, as far as skeletal muscle, I put here attaching to the bones via the tendons. Smooth muscle, the walls of internal organs and tubes, so say like blood vessels and such. And the cardiac muscle down in the heart, allowing for pumping of the blood so that we can oxygenate send oxygen to the cells, the tissues of our body, as well as remove and send also nutrition, right, glucose in particular, to the cells of our body, tissues of our body, and then remove waste products and remove CO2, carbon dioxide. Okay? And here you're seeing examples of the different types of tissues. And again, skeletal muscle. Sure, you can, please do.
So it's by breathing that we excrete the waste, right?
Well, for the carbon dioxide, correct.
For the CO2.
Yes,
so
for the CO2,
I was wondering, is there like a definitive answer, like a real true answer about whether or not or how much wearing the masks is like keeping that CO2 in us?
So I have to tell you this, right? There must be some type of, so there have been some studies done, and some studies have showed that there's nothing that's gone on so far. there would have to be more, like a larger group, a larger population of people that they do these studies for. I would tell you that it's probably not the best thing to continually breathing your own CO2. But depending upon where you're at and where you work, you would have, and so like when I'm on campus, I have to wear the mask. And so can you take a break and go outside and take your mask off for a moment or so, and or in your car, so that you're not continually breathing in your own CO2? Yeah, understood. I think that that's important. And long-term effects of that, yeah, understood. Now know this, that like the Japanese population, the Chinese population, they've been wearing masks for many, many years, right? In other parts of the world. You know, at this point in time, this is just the normal that we have to, you know, be aware of and have to take part in. It's not something that's really, you know, we all have choices to make, and we should protect ourselves and protect others. I get the whole mask controversy. I do understand.
I'm
I do get
curious
it.
so much for helping me understand. I didn't realize that we actually excrete waste when we breathe.
Yeah, indeed. Yes. So it's really, it is important to know this, and it is important for us all to be aware that, you know, you do, if you're having to wear a mask throughout the day at a job site, you should go to the bathroom and you know, take the mask off, or go outside and take the mask off for a little bit and breathe some, you know, fresh air without breathing it through the mask. I think that there's wisdom to that for sure. But when you're around people, when you're at your job site, you know, when you're going into a building, a facility, yeah, you have to wear the mask. And so you just try to make the best of it, indeed. But you're welcome. Thank you for asking the question. The last type of tissue is nervous tissue, okay? And this is what we're going to end with today. Yeah, good. Right, yeah, so we'll end with this slide right here and finish up the slideshow next class. But again, like I said, please go into documents and resources and download your Chapter 4 PowerPoint, please, and review it. So the nervous tissue consists of neurons. These are nerve cells, and support cells. These are called glial cells. So these neurons, very, very important, folks. Now, know that neurons are not like epithelial tissue. So epithelial tissue replaces itself when it's damaged. Nervous tissue, neurons, except for in the case of your sense of smell, neurons are not being replaced. So when nerve cells die, and you have many of them, so don't freak out about this, but know that when nerve cells die, they're not replaced with other nerve cells. Okay, so that's an issue, and that's a problem. And so having brain damage, having being involved in an accident where there's a severing of the spinal cord, well, anything distal, anything further down can affect function of your limbs. So if you're damaged in the neck and the spinal cord has been damaged or severed, you can become what's called a quadriplegic. We've heard this term, where you have no control over your arms and your legs. Or if you have damage below the shoulder area, you can have damage to that cord, and it can affect your ability to move your lower extremities and walk. So we realize that neurons, these nerve cells, they're different than other cells of the body, absolutely, in that they're not being renewed as, say, other tissue like epithelial tissue or connective tissue. Now, the one connective tissue that's not really being repaired would be cartilage, because there's no blood supply. So that's similar in that that's not really repairing itself. Minimally repairing itself, let's put it that way, minimally. Neurons contain a nucleus, cytoplasm, nerve extensions. So this cytoplasm, when you think of the inner portion of the cell, that's called the cytoplasm. So I tell patients it's the guts of the cell. It really is. It has all these like little organelles. I mentioned to you one. I said the mitochondria. That's one area where it's producing this ATP. Again, we're not talking about really cells in this class here. We're focusing on more of cell biology. We're talking about more of the tissues and going on from there. So these dendrites and these axons are these extensions. And so the dendrites will receive information, the axons will send out an information. In particular, a neuron can contain one or more of these dendrites and only one axon. Okay, so information that's going to another, communicating from one neuron to another, or a neuron to a gland, or a neuron to a muscle, only one axon. Okay. And I said to you about these glial cells or these neuroglia. These are the support cells. Okay. And they help to bring nutrition and protect the nerve cells. All right, folks. So we're going to end the class for today.